All right, so today we're diving into a case that's been a mystery for decades. The Heather Teague case.
Yeah, this one is a real head scratcher.
We're going to be trying to piece together what happened using a true crime podcast episode as our main source.
Right, and it's fascinating because it really highlights how much we rely on eyewitness accounts, especially back then in the 90s before all the fancy forensic tech we have now.
It all starts on August 26th, 1995. A beautiful summer day at Newburgh Beach in Kentucky. Our key witness, a guy named Tim Walthall, is across the Ohio River just casually checking out the beach with his telescope. He's watching some people riding around on three-wheelers when, all of a sudden, he sees something really disturbing.
He sees this man come out of the woods, and he grabs Heather Teague. She was just laying there sunbathing, grabs her by the hair, might have even had some kind of weapon.
And forces her back into the woods.
Walthall immediately calls the Indiana State Police.
But because the abduction happened on the Kentucky side, he gets transferred over to the Kentucky State Police. He tells the dispatcher what he saw.
Describes the guy as tall, around 200 pounds, late 20s or 30s, with dark hair and a thick beard.
Not exactly the most unique description.
No, not really. That could describe a lot of people.
Especially in that area.
Exactly. And that's one of the big problems investigators faced right from the start. You've got this eyewitness account.
Yeah.
Which is crucial, of course, but it's also pretty general. It just wasn't specific enough to really narrow down the suspects.
The police finally get to the beach about 30 minutes later, and they're actually relying on Walthall to guide them from across the river.
Wow.
They find Heather's bikini top, and then deeper in the woods they find her swimsuit bottoms and her towel.
The fact that they needed Walthall to point them to the evidence shows how remote that area was.
Yeah, it's pretty isolated.
Must made the investigation a lot harder. Fewer potential witnesses. And more time for whoever took her to get away.
Now here's where things get a little more complicated. This actually wasn't Heather's first disappearance. 2 weeks earlier she had gone missing, but she was found a few days later. Her mother, Sarah Teague, said that Heather had been stayed with friends, keeping her stuff in her car. And there were some concerns about drug use, which might have been a factor in that first disappearance. But her family insisted that drugs weren't involved in the abduction.
So that earlier disappearance raises a lot of questions, like, was Heather going through something? Was she more vulnerable than people realized?
It definitely adds another layer to this whole thing.
For sure. It's something investigators would have looked into, but it also makes it even harder to understand what led to her abduction.
The police launch a full investigation, searching the area, interviewing people who were at the beach or lived nearby, even stopping cars that matched the suspect's description. They found Heather's car at the scene, but even after searching it thoroughly, they couldn't find any real clues. And get this, even though Walthall mentioned seeing other people at the beach, no one else came forward saying they saw the abduction.
Really? You'd think with a crowded beach, someone else would have noticed something.
You would think.
Makes you wonder if people just weren't paying attention. Or maybe there weren't as many people there as we thought.
It's definitely strange.
Yeah.
Adds to the mystery for sure. But then a videographer comes forward with footage he took that same day. He'd been hired by some local farmers who thought their property was being vandalized. They wanted to catch whoever was doing it.
Oh, wow. So he just happened to be in the right place at the right time.
Right.
Talk about a lucky break.
And it turned out to be crucial because his footage not only showed Heather driving to the beach, but it also caught a red Ford Bronco with a chrome luggage rack heading towards the beach a little later.
A red Ford Bronco.
Police were desperate to find the owner of that Bronco. They released the details to the public, asking for any information. But whoever was driving that day stayed silent.
Oh, man, it's like their best lead was slipping away.
Exactly. And then 4 days after Heather's disappearance, things take another turn. But 2 composite sketches of the potential abductor.
2?
2, each based on a different witness.
Wow. That definitely complicates things. It does. Makes you wonder if they were dealing with more witnesses than they initially thought. And it also raises the possibility that one or both of those sketches might not even be accurate.
Exactly. The first sketch was based on what Walthall told him. It showed a man in his 30s, short dark hair, a big round nose, and a full beard. The second sketch was from a witness who saw a woman struggling in a red vehicle. This one showed a man with slightly longer hair, a fuller beard, and a sharper nose.
So 2 pretty different descriptions. And the police didn't actually say if either sketch was of the driver of the red Bronco.
Nope.
So now we're left wondering, were they looking for one guy, two guys, or even three?
It's a real puzzle.
So many possibilities, it's almost overwhelming. You can really see how the investigators were hitting roadblocks left and right.
It's like a jigsaw puzzle, but with pieces from different puzzles all mixed together. And then, just when things seem to be at a standstill, they get a break. Police receive multiple tips pointing them toward a man named Marvin Dill.
Marvin Dill.
And guess what?
What?
He not only fit the description from one of the sketches, but he also drove a red Ford Bronco.
Hold on a second. This is where things start to get really interesting. Dill had a bit of a past. I mean, his record included harassing people over the phone, and he was even arrested for soliciting sex from a minor.
And during that arrest...
This is what gets me, okay? During that arrest, police found loaded handguns, duct tape, rope, and marijuana in his car. Not exactly the kind of stuff you want to see together.
It's like a checklist for a true crime episode. It's unsettling, to say the least.
Absolutely.
So what happened next?
Well, the police headed to Dill's trailer where he lived with his wife and son, but he wasn't there.
Of course not.
But his wife, Tracy, she confirmed that Dill did drive a red Bronco, the one matching the description, and she also said he looked like the guy Tim Walhall had described. Later that day, Tracy's lawyer contacted the police, expressing concern for Dill. He claimed Dill had become extremely agitated after finding out the police were asking about him.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and he even threatened to commit suicide if they came for him.
That's heavy. So did they go after him?
Armed with this new information, the police obtained a search warrant for Dill's property. In the early hours of September 1st, 1995, things escalated quickly. Police arrived at the trailer, and one of Dill's friends went inside to try to reason with him. Then, a single gunshot rang out.
So he took his own life.
It certainly seems that way.
Does that mean he was guilty?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Dill's suicide, while it might seem like an admission of guilt, complicates the investigation. You can't question him directly anymore, and it leaves so many questions unanswered. Was it guilt over what happened to Heather that drove him to this? Or was it more about his past legal troubles and a fear of going back to jail?
I guess we'll never know for sure.
That's the frustrating part.
So what did the police do after Dill's death?
The FBI joined the investigation, and their focus shifted to the red Bronco found hidden on Dill's property. They brought in cadaver dogs to search his 28-acre property and even expanded their search to include his known hunting grounds. Nothing. They found absolutely no trace of Heather.
That's heartbreaking. So they had all this suspicion around Dill, but no concrete evidence.
Exactly. His behavior and suicide were suspicious, yes, but they didn't definitively prove he was guilty. This lack of certainty kept the case open and fueled all sorts of theories and speculation.
It's like one step forward, two steps back. What about forensic evidence? Did they find anything in the Bronco?
They did find 2 bloodstains and a hair, but none of it could be conclusively linked to Heather.
Oh man, so close.
So close, yet so far. And this is where Heather's mother, Sarah, takes center stage.
Determined to find answers.
Absolutely. She refused to let the case fade away. Despite the police saying there were no new leads, Sarah requested a grand jury be convened.
She was taking matters into her own hands.
She understood the limitations of the police investigation and wanted an independent way to uncover the truth. While the grand jury didn't result in any charges, it did put a spotlight on Tracy Dill's suspicious behavior.
Suspicious in what way?
Well, think about it. She hid Dill's Bronco, and her overall behavior just screamed, "I know something."
Did she ever talk?
Not a word. She invoked her Fifth Amendment right and refused to testify. This only made the mysteries surrounding her potential involvement even deeper. It really felt like she held the key to unlocking what happened to Heather. But then, just as you think things couldn't get any more tangled, another twist emerges.
Another twist? You're killing me here. What happened?
Less than a month after the grand jury wrapped up, rumors started circulating about another potential suspect.
You've got to be kidding me. Another suspect.
The possibility of another suspect added a whole new layer of complexity to an already intricate case. It challenged the assumption that Dill was the only person involved and forced investigators to consider other scenarios.
So who was this new suspect?
His name is Glenn Rogers.
Glenn Rogers.
He was a truck driver suspected of multiple murders across several states. Not only did his mugshot bear a striking resemblance to one of the composite sketches, but he had also been in Kentucky around the time Heather disappeared. And to make matters even more suspicious, Rogers had made some chilling comments about disposing of bodies.
That's eerie.
It certainly raised red flags. His resemblance to the sketch, his presence in the area, and those disturbing comments made him a very compelling person of interest. However, there was one major snag.
There's that.
Tim Walthall, our key eyewitness, adamantly insisted that Rogers was not the man he saw abducting Heather.
Wait, but didn't you say Roger's mugshot looked like one of the sketches?
It did. And to make things even more confusing, Walthall actually picked Rogers out of a photo lineup 3 times. But each time, he insisted it was a case of mistaken identity. He firmly believed that Marvin Dill was the one who took Heather.
So now we have 2 potential suspects and conflicting eyewitness testimony.
It's a mess, isn't it? Was Walthall's memory faulty after all this time, or were there actually 2 people involved in Heather's disappearance? The possibility of Dill and Rogers working together was a theory that started to gain traction. After all, they were both in the same area around the same time. However, even with this theory, solid evidence remained elusive. The investigation was once again stuck in a web of conflicting information and unanswered questions.
Yeah.
It really was.
But even with all this uncertainty surrounding the case, Sarah Teague never gave up.
No, she didn't.
She kept Heather's name out there, putting up billboards, organizing those reenactments, hanging purple ribbons every year on the anniversary of Heather's disappearance.
It's incredible, really. I mean, her dedication just shows the power of a mother's love, that absolute refusal to let her daughter be forgotten.
She became Heather's voice, keeping the case in the public eye, pushing the authorities to keep searching for answers.
And she even went so far as to consult with a psychic.
Really?
Yeah, it just shows how desperate she was for any kind of lead, no matter how unconventional.
You know, it's interesting, because it turns out the police had even consulted a psychic themselves at one point.
Oh, wow.
It just goes to show that sometimes even the most experienced investigators are willing to try anything when a case goes cold.
Yeah, I can see that. When a case goes cold, the pressure mounts, the frustration builds, you start grasping at straws, hoping that maybe anything outside the box will lead to a breakthrough.
In 2008, they did a bloodhound search around Marvin Dill's property. And for a moment, it seemed like there might be a new development. The dog had 13 hits along a road leading to Dill's property.
13 hits?
Yeah, which of course made Sarah even more suspicious of Dill's involvement.
I bet. But was that enough?
Unfortunately, no.
Yeah.
It turned out the bloodhound wasn't properly certified, so the results couldn't be used in court.
Oh man, that's gotta be tough. To have that hope and then have it dashed against the rules of evidence.
It's a constant back and forth between hope and frustration in this case. And then things got even more complicated. When Sarah got access to the 911 call from Tim Walthall, the first witness, she said the call she listened to was different from the one she had heard years earlier.
Different.
She claimed it had been edited somehow.
Edited.
Which made her think that maybe someone had tampered with the evidence.
That's a serious accusation, if true. It raises questions about the whole investigation.
Right.
Was crucial evidence compromised?
Exactly. Driven by that suspicion.
Yeah.
Sarah filed a lawsuit demanding access to the chain of custody records for the call.
Yeah.
She won.
Wow.
But even with those records, the mystery of the 2 different calls was never solved.
Huh.
And then Sarah drops a bombshell. She reveals information from the FBI file that suggests a whole new possible motive for Heather's disappearance.
A new motive?
Yeah.
What was it?
Well, according to Sarah.
Yeah.
The FBI file suggested that Heather might have been more involved in the drug world than anyone initially realized.
Oh.
The file even suggested that Heather might have been considering entering witness protection because of her connection to a major drug ring.
Witness protection, that's a game changer. It brings in a whole new set of possibilities.
Right.
Like, was Heather targeted because she knew too much about criminal activities? Was her disappearance less about a random act of violence and more about dangerous secrets?
It definitely raises more questions than it answers.
Yeah.
And the problem is, law enforcement never actually confirmed what Sarah said, so we're left wondering what it all means.
It just shows how important it is to look at every single aspect of a victim's life. You know, their relationships, their activities, potential risks. All of that can provide crucial insights into why they might have disappeared.
It's like trying to put together a puzzle, but you're missing half the pieces, and you don't have the picture to guide you. Despite years of tips and searches, they even searched cisterns, water basins, oil tanks, the Green River. Heather is still missing.
They must have searched everywhere.
They did. They found some skeletal remains in Henderson County in 2021. But they turned out not to be Heather's.
It's amazing, though, that the efforts to find Heather continue, even decades later. It speaks to the impact of this case. and the determination of those who want answers.
It's been almost 30 years since Heather Teague disappeared, and her case remains a chilling reminder that some mysteries just linger. The leads might have gone cold, but the hope for answers never truly fades. Sarah Teague's unwavering dedication to finding her daughter is a testament to the power of a mother's love and the relentless pursuit of truth.
This deep dive into the Heather Teague case leaves us with more questions than answers. Was she a random victim, or was her disappearance connected to something darker, like her potential involvement with a dangerous drug ring? Was Marvin Dill involved, or was there someone else, maybe even Glenn Rogers? Pulling the strings, the truth remains hidden, but the search for it can't stop. If you have any information that might help shed light on this case, please contact the Kentucky State Police.
Sometimes, even with all the digging and exploring, some mysteries endure. Heather Teague's story reminds us that even in broad daylight, in a place full of people, the truth can vanish without a trace. But we can't lose hope. We have to keep Heather's memory alive. Maybe, just maybe, someday the answers will come to light.